Tēnā koutou katoa, Markie here again, and I want to talk about vampires. And the irony is that as I speak to you, I am coming under attack from vampires. Now that might sound extreme. You might think, "Oh my God, what's happened to this man? He's gone insane." The vampires in question are sandflies. Which frequent these parts in great numbers. They're sometimes known as no-see-ums because they're smaller than mosquitoes and you don't see them but you feel them. They give a nasty, well, it's not a bite, is it? It's actually an injection, isn't it? They stick a proboscis into your skin, suck your blood, inject an anticoagulant so that it flows nicely, and they feed on you. There's a mosquito as well there. We've got two different types of vampires. And yeah, they're vampiric. They live off your blood. It's just like people sometimes think, why do we have this thing about vampires? Well, vampires are around us all the time drinking. Our blood is regularly consumed by these little creatures. So I'll try and make this one brief, even though it's quite nice sitting out here today. And I have got insect repellent on, but it doesn't always work. Vampires, okay. I'm talking fiction. I'm getting into fiction here, but I'm interested in the origins of fiction, and I just did another video with a book review for a book called Unholy Hungers, which is all about, or mainly about, kind of where some of the psychological origins of some of the vampire tropes and vampire folklore is used in fiction. So, staking vampires, okay, this is partly a rant as well. This is partly kind of me having a moan about kind of tropes, is that I've never tried to stake anybody through the heart. I'm sure you'll be reassured to know. But I would imagine it's not that easy because the heart is the most vulnerable, one of the most, I think it's the heart and the brain, aren't they? They're pretty two of the most vulnerable kind of organs in the body, and they're well protected, aren't they? We've got the skull to protect the brain, and we've got this cage and the sternum. Got this big bony breastplate that's here to protect our heart. So in movies and things like that, when people are being kind of stabbed through the heart, and it always seems to be quite easy, not the case at all. I'd imagine it'd be incredibly difficult to actually try and stab somebody through the heart, even with a sword or a knife, let alone a bit of wood, a bit of 4x2 whatever it might be. So what's the deal there with that? And moving, and that kind of annoys me. I mean, I used to love Buffy. It was probably one of the worst ones because it's just so easy to stake them, and it's that the stakes that they have on Buffy are like these weedy little things in like kind of toothpick, and you just go and dusted vampire. And I think they actually try and explain that. I'm not sure if it's like a retcon, but I think there is a mention in there that their chest area is a bit soft or something. There's this, but why would the vampires have this inbuilt vulnerability? It doesn't make sense to me. So if you're going to stake a vampire, I'd be looking at something that's, if vampires were real and I had to stake them, I would be looking at something that's a bit more like a fence post, before it's gone in. Some hefty, heavy piece of wood that's got some weight and got some momentum. Especially if this is going to be in a kind of hand-to-hand combat kind of situation, not some tiny little little thing. So yeah, what is that about, really? I think in Dracula, when the staking scene in Dracula, what they're attempting to do is open up a coffin with a vampire sleeping in there, and kind of quite neatly, penetrate the heart of a corpse with and using a hammer. There's a hammer. It's not just the stake; it's the hammer. So that kind of makes more sense, and also it's, I guess it's easier to carry, and I don't know. It's quite, a little bit more seemly to have a kind of a small, discreet kind of stake there. But very generally speaking, very impractical. If you're going to stake a vampire, you know, like I say, something really hefty that you can get some weight behind. But why do we have this thing about this? You know, where does this small stake come from? Well, there actually is a historical precedent for this. This comes from, you know, folkloric beliefs certainly from Europe, Eastern Europe and Western Europe, that if somebody dies, so somebody that's a suicide, that's a murderer, they would often not be buried in consecrated ground. Okay, so you know this comes into terms. So this is days of Catholicism. So suicide, murder, mortal sin. So this is somebody that's not going to go to heaven. They're probably going to go to hell, but maybe they won't go to heaven or hell. Maybe their spirit will roam. Maybe their body will roam, and be in neither heaven nor hell, and will torment the living. Okay, so you know there were beliefs that, you know, the very old vampiric beliefs were often that, you know, a corpse would rise from the grave and drain the blood of the living. I suspect that there is something more. This is where we would get into the video that I want to do on psychic vampires, that actually this would be about draining not the person's blood but their psychic energy, and it would be a spirit, not an actual kind of reanimated corpse. But that's what people actually believed at one point. So what would happen is a couple of things. One is people in these kind of conditions, or suicides and murderers mainly, they would be buried at crossroads. So they wouldn't be buried in consecrated ground, not in a church. And the reason they would be buried at crossroads is the idea that whether it's the spirit or the body that rises, it's confused, doesn't know where it is, and it doesn't know which way to go. It's like kind of too many options. It's like, oh, could I go this way, could I go that way? And they end up kind of not going anywhere. It kind of implies that the undead have difficulty. You get overwhelmed by choice, as many of us do. And not only that, but sometimes the body was staked in the coffin, not to not the kind of stake you through the heart and you'll turn to dust or you'll erupt into flames, but that were actually staked into the ground, as in like, nailed down, pinned down, so you can't go anywhere. So whether this was, done as a physical thing, thinking that the body would rise, or whether it was done as a kind of a magical thing, almost like a kind of a spell or a charm to stop the soul rising, but they would often pin down the body. Okay, so therefore a stake. Sometimes they would remove the heart and things like that as well, remove the head. So I guess if you put the stake through the heart, you're killing two birds with one stone, killing one vampire and two birds with one stone, one stick. I'll see. The joy of words. So this idea, and I think sometimes it was actually an iron, a spike, an iron spike, like a bit of a park railing kind of. So that's where we get the idea of staking vampires in the movies and the books of today, or the modern era, and that's kind of where it comes from, and that's probably why we've still got this kind of notion of weedy stakes, because if you're hammering something, you want something that's kind of fairly sharp. So it's a metal spike with a point that's going to drive through the corpse and the wood of the coffin, if there is one, and down into the ground. And just basically like a kind of a giant nail, really. That's where it comes from, but not a bit of fence post, which is what if I was in the Buffy universe, that's what I'd be carrying around with me. It was a big bit of fence post that I can swing. The other kind of irony I just kind of throw in is that Vlad the Impaler is often cited as the inspiration for Dracula, and of course that was all about sticking big pointy sticks through people in horrible ways. it's kind of really horrific stuff. But I think, you know, maybe subliminally that kind of found its way into the vampire fiction. So I hope you found that interesting. Join me on Patreon if you want to hear this controversial, edgy, risky, epic video. It might even be a series on psychic vampires, energy vampires. So that's something that I'm very interested in. Check out some of those other videos. I will put some links down. I've had lots of neck, shoulder, head, hip problem, lots of pain lately through working from home and being using a laptop. So I'm not too much kind of I'm very behind in kind of uploading things, and anything that I can't do on my phone I need to do on a laptop. I'm kind of avoiding, really, because I really need to keep away from that computer as much as possible, you know. So I'm just doing sort of essential work on it and then coming away from it. So I will put some links down, but it won't take me a while before I get around to doing that, and that's why I'm a bit behind on uploading things onto Patreon and things like that. So, which is more difficult to do. Most things I do from my iPhone. So I film it on my iPhone, I upload it on my iPhone, but when it comes to some of the finer details, that's when I come to a PC. So my apologies that things are a little bit more chaotic than they normally are. So stay safe from the vampires. Don't invite them into your house, and yeah, maybe a whole range of stakes. You know, from combat stakes to you know, surgical stakes is in order and required. But yeah, let me know what you think about that. Let me know what you think about some of the other kind of vampire tropes, and do check out the book review video that I did on Unholy Hungers, because that's about a book that explains maybe some of the psychological origins of a lot of the vampire tropes. So, Rangimarie.